Wake up your morning in a brand new way with the positive people, places, events, and things in and around your neighborhood and around the world. No matter where you live, your mornings are about to get better. It's the refreshing way to start your day. No doom or gloom, just bright sunshine no matter what the weather. Metro Magazine with Bonnie McDaniel. Inspiring, informative, intelligent, Ion. Positively the best way to start your morning.
I'm Bonnie McDaniel and welcome to Metro Magazine. We have a fascinating woman with us this morning who, once you hear her story, you're going to know why we chose her as an amazing woman. Jaspen Boothe she's lived, I would say, when I think about her story, she's lived probably 3 or 4 lives in her young years. And so before I go any further in telling the story, I'm going to introduce you this morning to Jaspen Boothe, who is the founder of Final Salute. Welcome to Metro Magazine, Jaspen.
Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
I'm doing fine. You know, it's so interesting how we met. A very unlikely setting since I typically don't do a whole lot of birthday parties, but a mutual friend, I guess you can say, invited us to an afternoon out for women. And boy, am I glad I went because I had the pleasant opportunity of meeting you. So one of the things that you remember that afternoon, I went around the room and it was really the inspiration for me starting this Amazing Women series because I had the idea in my head that there are a lot of women out there like yourself who go about doing what they do every day and people would never know unless you told them so. And I know we are not inclined to boast and talk about ourselves. So I'm taking this opportunity to boast for you. Now, one of the things I learned when talking to you was the fact that you are a veteran. So if you want to talk about that just for a moment, and then we're going to maybe go backwards and tell your story as to what caused you to wind up as a veteran in the military. So talk about your military experience.
I had always wanted to create a tradition in my family. Mm-hmm. My family really didn't have any traditions, there wasn't any traditions of or histories of, sororities, fraternities, anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I had always just been intrigued by the military, mm-hmm. the brotherhood and sisterhood of the military. Mm-hmm. And so I decided that I was going to join the Army. And I went in after I got out of college. I served 13 years in the Army. Mm-hmm. I got out as a captain. And even during my military career, I was inclined to help people. So mm-hmm. I was a personnelist by trade that allowed me to help soldiers, their family members, and just be involved in their lives and making sure that they got what they needed during their service. And so,
so you said that the thing that really inspired you to do that was that you wanted to create a tradition. Talk about your growing up years and what was it that led you to want to do that in the first place?
Well, I would definitely say my childhood was not ideal by any sorts.
Now, I understand you're one of 3 children?
Yes, I'm the youngest of 3 girls.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Chicago, born in Cabrini Green projects, mm-hmm. and kind of navigated my way through several different housing projects growing up. Okay. But I guess the weird thing about being born and raised in the projects is you don't see yourself as being born and raised in the projects because that's all you know. Okay. And so that's just everything around you seems normal. Mm-hmm. But, growing up that way is not necessarily, a road to being unsuccessful. That's just your circumstances mm-hmm. at that point. Mm-hmm. But as I got older and, started getting educated and looking around, I realized there was a life outside the projects.
Mm-hmm. And talk to me about that because there must have been something that happened either with a teacher or maybe even your parent or one of your parents. What was it that made you know that this is not what I want my life story to be? Was there anything in particular that happened to you?
There are some things I'm not ready to talk about at this time.
I understand.
But I will say that I wanted to be a different mother to mm-hmm. my children mm-hmm. Than my mother was to me. Okay. And it's parents need to protect their children. I do not feel as girls we were protected as well as we should have been, and we were not given as much nurturing and support to be other things. However, me and my sisters, we definitely have a different life. And I understand there were some traumatic things that happened in their life that may have attributed to the way they turned out. But I'm a person that believes that, you know, your circumstances don't have to be your future. And your childhood, to me, is your parents' life, because as a child, you're not in control over what you do, what you eat, where you go. And so I just knew at the point that when I was able to be an adult, that my life would definitely have a different trajectory than the life that I was afforded as a child.
Were there teachers or other people outside of your home that you had the opportunity to go to who would lend you support? Was there anything that happened that helped you to know, okay, I can do this, I'm going to be okay? Were there any people like that around you?
I never, I guess I never really talked about my childhood, or even if I was experiencing any stress issues or anything like that, I would keep them to myself, because some of the things I was embarrassed about, and some of the things I knew would probably get my parents in trouble if I had said anything to anyone. But I was, my mother and my father were not married, so I grew up in a household with my mother and my stepfather. And he was, I would probably say the villain in the story.
And you know what? If you're not comfortable talking about it, I certainly don't want to take you there. So just please feel free to say what you're comfortable with, and if you don't want to say, it's okay.
As a mother, again, it's your responsibility. It's not an obligation. It's responsibility to take care of and take care and protect your children. But, you know, I know that there are some women who let men consume them. And I believe that my mother was so consumed with her husband that she forgot, you know, maybe how to be a mother, or, you know, I don't really know, you know, what goes through people's heads or what her thought pattern was, but I just would say that I, you know, did not want to raise my children in a household or around the people that I was exposed to as a child.
Okay, so you did you finish your school years in Chicago?
I lived in Chicago till I was 16.
Okay.
My mother and my stepfather had separated for a short period, and then she got back together with him. But he was living in Mississippi at the time.
Okay.
I was the only child that wasn't an adult, and so I had to uproot and move to the south to her. Okay. So I completed my high school and attended my undergraduate college in Mississippi.
Okay, so let's talk about, you graduated from high school, which was really an accomplishment given the conditions you had to grow up in. And then you went off to college. Talk about your college years.
Well, you know, college to me was, I guess, you know, for a lot of children, college was stressful, and, you know, some can't manage their classes, but college for me was like a new beginning. You know, it was, you know, that was my springboard. This is my opportunity to get that education so I can go out and be in the world and be competitive and be that person that I truly wanted to be inside.
So where did you go to school?
My undergraduate was at Mississippi Valley State University. Okay. So, or I was in the SWAC, as they call it. And I will say that I've had the Black college experience, and I also went to UNLV. But I will say that Black college experience was definitely a unique experience and something that I cherish. You know, it was a.
And you know that I want you to really. I want to stop there just for a moment, because I think I grew up in the South, and Florida. A lot of people say it's not the South, but trust me, I was in the South. And I know I had an opportunity, I had a full scholarship to go to, there were 4 colleges that offered me a scholarship, and I chose to go to an HBCU. And I want to agree with you in that regard, saying that it was special. I found that the professors tend to be very nurturing to the students. I think had I gone to Florida State or to the University of Florida, it probably would have been very different for me. Because a lot of kids, they need that, especially if you're coming from a small town. So you were saying that you really cherished that. And what were some of the things that happened to you to make you say that?
I moved a lot as a child, so I don't really have a neighborhood.
Right. So you went to the hood.
Right. I don't really have a neighborhood. I don't really have, a place I can go back to, and I have friends here and their grandparents are here, and I can still go back there and link up with them. But in college, I gained friends. Friends that I still have today. And I attended college on a full basketball scholarship.
Okay.
So
that's something I did not know. You played basketball.
Yes.
Okay.
So
were you getting good at it?
I thought I was pretty great. But, it was just, my basketball team, they became my sisters, as well as my friends. And we did things together. We joked, we played. And I had the weirdest basketball name. I don't care to share it. But
okay. I won't cry if you don't want to
Some of my friends will go on Facebook and post and things like, hey, people don't know that person. Stop saying that. But I would just say I was pretty aggressive on the basketball court.
So let me ask you, what did sports teach you? What did you gain from that experience, having played basketball?
I think ultimately sports led to me joining the military because that's the first team environment.
Okay, so you learned about the importance of team, working together as a team. Okay.
Yeah. And I like that experience. And I like even when you left the court, you still have those same friends. You can just gather, for basketball practice or games, you met each other's families, you went up each other's houses, you help each other, with your homework. And it was just something that I had never had. Me and my sisters, although raised in the same household, we were never very close. I was always the odd child out. But just to now have that environment where I have, these sisters from all diverse backgrounds, and we're learning and growing and building together. It was just a great experience.
Okay. Now, so you went to college and you mentioned the fact that it led you to go into the military. Talk about that, if you will. You said when you left, you were a captain. What was your entry when you went into the military? Or your position, rather.
I joined the military after I graduated college from Mississippi Valley State. I relocated to Las Vegas. In the South, and especially in the Delta, there are not very many opportunities.
Right.
And I went to school for television and radio broadcasting.
Okay.
It wasn't.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And so my aunt lived in Vegas, and she said, hey, come out here. There's tons of opportunities. And I went there. I graduated honors. I had great internships that I had done, but I was told I was too tall.
Interesting. It's interesting you say that, because now that you mention that, most of the people that I know who are big names in television, they're very, very petite, with the exception of, say, Robin Roberts. Who was also a basketball player from Good Morning America. But now that you say that, the women, because I very often when I go into a studio, for instance, if I'm being interviewed, I feel like an Amazon when I'm standing next to them, even though I'm not as tall as you are, but they are very petite. So it's interesting that you say that, and I don't know why that is.
Well, he told me that I was taller than most of the average men, and I wouldn't look good on camera next to them because I would overpower them. And
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and I said, I wish someone would have told me that 4 years ago, and a degree later.
So the idea, you're bringing up some interesting information that I did not know. The idea of a woman overpowering a guy because she's taller than he is a very interesting little tidbit that I just learned that.
Yes, I guess I was, visually intimidating.
Okay.
But so I was like, okay, well, and then I went into, I worked in banking for a little while. But
go back to television for a moment. What were your aspirations there? Did you want to be a broadcaster?
I wanted to be an anchor. I had done sports anchoring as part of my internship, and I just saw myself you know, being on TV, being a broadcaster, telling people stories, traveling and doing just all these great things behind the camera. And until I moved to Vegas and was told, you are just too tall.
Wow. That's a very interesting bit of information. Now, so you went into banking and you want to talk about that? Was there anything that happened there that kind of helped you then go to the next step?
Well, I guess once you get out into civilian world, although you're part of a team, you're pretty much an individual who competes against everybody.
That was your experience in banking?
Yes.
Okay.
And it didn't fit me.
Okay.
Because again, I was inclined to be a part of a team, and that's the kind of environment I work with. So although they have the big HR people and the CEOs that say, yeah, we're a team, we work together, everyone in there is looking to out you or to best you. And I didn't thrive well in that environment.
Did you find that across the board between men and women, or was it particular to
between men and women? And everybody just wanted to get ahead, they wanted to get to the next level. But I was always inclined to help people want to get to the next level, or to help them do that. I was never inclined to, okay, well, Jazz, you have to come in and be the best person so you can get that promotion, or be the best person so you can do X, Y, and Z. Well, how can I help Karen today? How can I help Greg? I was always inclined to help people and want to be a part of building and supporting a team. And in some of those competitive environments, everyone doesn't have that same mindset. And so, it just wasn't a fit for me. I that dynamic, we clashed.
Okay. So how long were you in banking?
Probably less than a year.
Okay.
And then that's when I decided to, join the military.
Okay. And we're going to put a sticky note there, and we're going to go to break. And when we come back, you're going to hear about her fascinating career in the military. We'll be right back. Just a few. Queen Bee is a book about some of the habits, some of the things that we women do really to undermine ourselves and undermine other women. And it's something that we really can't afford to do any longer. It's actually a book that is a combination of research that I've done interviewing other women and men about what is it that has kept us over the years from becoming the empowered women that we say we are. I have taken interviews from women who talk about some of the experiences they've had in working with other women, either in the capacity of just having relationships in different types of settings, whether it be in the corporate boardroom or a lot of the women that I talk to are entrepreneurs, but really just delving into not just the things that we do in terms of day-to-day, to perform our jobs, but really looking at the things that are really holding us back. One of the things that's interesting to me is the fact that if you take a woman, an average woman, and if you're honest, and put her in a room with 15, 20 other women and have a gorgeous woman walk in the room, watch the reaction. Chances are very good she's not going to like her, and it has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that she, in their own minds, looks a certain way. If you take that and reverse it, and you are the woman who thinks that everything about yourself is intact, you're going to respond to that woman in a different way. And you're going to listen to her rather than look at her physical being. And that's what I want women to do. I want us to stop looking at what we have on, whether or not, we're thinner or heavier than the next woman, but really to look at who we are as women. And we're back. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Jaspen Boothe, who is the founder of Final Salute. And when we went to break, she was talking with us about her entry into the military. So Jaspen, if you'd like to continue.
Okay, so after I was, let down by the news stations, they did tell me that I could work teleprompter. And I was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, I thought about, okay, I have to make some career choices here. I can't just be bouncing from job to job. And then, I rethought about the military again. And, when I saw a recruiter, he told me about the certain jobs you can have. I really didn't care about what type of job I was going to go in the military. I just wanted to go right away and just, get engaged and get involved. There was never a military presence in my family, so I can't say, oh, my father served or my uncles or anything like that. My aunt was married to a military man. I would spend some summers with her, and that was the only experience I had with if you're in the military. But even seeing them march and running groups was just exciting to me because they were all in step and they were all in tune. I'm like, wow,
So going back to that idea of team, of teamwork, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they were just all in sync, and I like that. And so I had a degree, and I could have went in as an officer, but I just feel that before you can lead, you need to be able to know how to follow.
I like that.
And so I came in as a specialist at E4, and I actually signed up as a motor transport operator with an 88 mic. And so I drove really big trucks, tank haulers, they were called HETs. And I thought it was just cool to be behind that big truck and moving all that weight. I thought I was like something special.
You know what I have to say? You have to stop me for a second, because you know what? A lot of people don't know about me is that I drove forklifts when I was in technology.
Really?
Yes, I did. And I was working for a company out of southern France, and we did logistics. And for me to understand time and motion, I needed to actually experience what that felt like so that I could translate that into, when I was talking to my clients. And so, I drove in these big warehouses where they were storing all kinds of things. I actually put on a hard hat and I drove a forklift. So I don't want to hear any comments about Bonnie driving a forklift, but I did it. So anyway, go back.
That was pretty cool, though, to handle all that steel.
It feels good. Yeah.
Playing with the big boys.
Yeah.
But even as I joined the military, I wasn't quite done with my education. I had always also been intrigued by sociology because people had always intrigued me. And so I decided to go back and do 2 years of sociology study at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where I subsequently ended up joining the Army ROTC program. And met a few more friends there, added to my family. And what I skipped over, there's some people in your life you don't want to mention because they're unimportant, but they were there at the time. So, but I had married the guy that I dated all through college. And when I relocated to Las Vegas, he went with me. And he was born and raised from Mississippi. And so I don't know if it was, the atmosphere that he couldn't handle, but we got out there and just from the moment we got there, we just started separating because I was focused on my career, my education, and of course my young son. And we were both young, but he was still focused on partying, hanging out, doing all those types of things that you're supposed to do while you're in college. So we just started to drift apart. But I just continued to focus on my career and growth. And I was doing very well. And I think at one time he started to despise me because he was one of those people like, he had a degree. And if he couldn't get a degree in what he went to school for, everything else was beneath him. So wouldn't work, wouldn't do anything. And so I just decided to focus on, I can't just not do anything. I have a child that's dependent upon me, who wasn't his son. But that was just a lot that I saw myself doing. I saw my mother married to a man who didn't work and didn't do anything. And, there was some familiarities floating, and I was like, no, this is not what I wanted for myself. And then he started to sabotage what I was doing. As I was going through Army ROTC, we have to do physical training in the morning. He would make me late by taking my car, hanging out all night, or not coming back, and me having to get rides, just trying to do things to throw me off. Because he felt he had no control over me, because he wasn't a breadwinner, wasn't a provider. And so, I guess he felt like, I have to do things to sabotage what she's doing to bring her back down to my level, which wasn't going to happen. And so once those things didn't work, he turned to, cheating. Because that was really going to get my attention and make me do the right thing, straighten up and pay attention to him, which just drove us further apart. And so after that didn't work, then he turned to domestic violence. So he thought he could control me by beating me.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I'm 6 foot. You're just not
going
to beat
so
me.
How many times
So
one time in this over.
Yeah. And,
wow.
At first it was, pushing and tugging, and then it ultimately turned to hitting. And I was not going to let anybody, especially a man that I had, made vows with before God, put his hands on me. And I guess he caught me on a bad day, and I have been arrested once.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was the incident that caused it to happen?
For fighting back. Okay. You have some cities and some states that, when both people are involved in an altercation, no matter who started it, you both go to jail for cooling off period, whatever. And after that, I was like, this relationship has turned toxic. I have to get out of it. And so shortly after that, I got my son. We moved to a place of our own, and I divorced him.
Okay.
Which was probably and I had been with him for 7 years. 4 years through college, and then married a year after we got to Vegas. And I think some women, they don't want to throw away time. Time is important to some women when they're in relationships, even if they're bad. I don't want to throw away 7 years. Well, I wasted 10 years of my life for this, and this. And so I didn't find it logical to waste 5 or 7 more years.
Right.
And I felt that I needed to get out. And it did take, I understand it takes a long time to get people out of your system, especially when he was, the first guy I really had a relationship with. And I had latched on to him because of, my childhood and my teen years.
Now, talk to me, because you were talking about the separation, how the two of you were growing apart. What was the impact on your son in all of this? What was happening with him?
Well, I had family. I always had family in Vegas. So, he would go to school, childcare. My aunt would help with them. My cousins would help with them. He never witnessed the violence or anything like that. And since we were together from when he was a newborn baby, basically, he called him daddy. So this was the father figure that he knew, because his father was never involved in his life. But even till this day, he doesn't know. He may know if he sees this.
Right.
But I made sure that I protected him, especially from the bad decisions that I made in life, because that was definitely a bad decision. Because I know when you're young, and some women think that marrying a person will change a person for the better, or a person will say, once we're married, I'll stop doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, you can't raise grown-ups.
No.
Yeah, you really can't.
So if they're exhibiting that behavior prior to you marrying them, it's probably not a good idea to marry them. And
it's probably going to magnify, because when you're dating, of course, you're trying to put on your best face, even though the best face isn't enough to cover up certain characteristics of a person. But so you ended the marriage, and what happened after that? Because I understand that there was a deployment. So let's talk about when did that happen?
After I divorced, I still had 1 more year to finish school and do my Army ROTC training. So about a year later, I got my second. I don't know what they call it. I didn't get another degree, but I had 2 years of sociology study in my belt, and I had Army ROTC. But I needed to relocate because I would always run into him or hear about him and doing this, and this, and I needed a clean slate and a clear start. And so we relocated back to the Midwest, where my family is originally from. We went to Missouri where my aunt stays, and we started there. So I'm an officer now. I'm a lieutenant in the Army. And so there's some training you have to go through, to learn your job and things like that. And after I completed that training, I was then back into the job market because I joined as a reservist and not as active duty.
Okay.
And so I was in St. Louis at the time, but really couldn't find a job that I particularly wanted. Then a job offer came up in New Orleans.
Okay, and that's how you got there. Okay.
Yes, and so I was able to go relocate to New Orleans, work as a unit administrator and part of a truck unit. I was familiar with the truck unit from my 88 Mike days in the military. But I had to go there and get situated first before I brought my son down. So my son stayed with my aunt in Missouri, where I went down to, get us a place, get situated, learn the rope school, things like that. And I hadn't been there more than 3 to 4 months when I got notified that, hey, you came up on the list to go to Iraq.
We're going to stop right there just for a moment, take a break, and then we're going to come back and talk about that deployment. And we'll be right back with more Metro Magazine.
Up to 40% of businesses never recover after experiencing a major disaster. Make a plan at ready.gov/business.
And we're back with more Metro Magazine and our conversation with Jaspen Boothe, who again is the founder or the creator of Final Salute. Jaspen, when we went to break, you were talking about you're now being deployed to go to Iraq as a part of your military duty. So let's talk about that.
Okay. So the year is now 2005. I've always wanted to start off like that.
It's fine.
And so I got pulled to be a postal platoon leader.
Okay.
And so I had to go to postal training. So they sent us up.
What is that job? I'm curious about that because I knew a woman who her name was Mary Ragland, and she was in the postal battalion back in World War II. So talk to me about that.
Just like, the USPS, you run a post office, you get all the mail in for the soldiers. And I mean, that's one of the most important jobs because that affects soldier morale.
And you know what's interesting? I don't know if you know of Mary Ragland, but she was in the unit, I think it was the 888, who really formed this during World War II. And you're talking about morale, and one of the reasons why these women were called upon to actually form a USPS within the military was because of morale during World War II. And they had to put together a system that became the foundation for the USPS that services everyone. So it's interesting that I'm talking to you, but she died, I guess Mary died maybe 2-3 years ago. And she was a part of that unit that formed that battalion that you're talking about right now. I think that's very interesting.
Very.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, when you're out there and facing these dangers or maybe even losing some women and men who you serve with, to get that letter from your child or your significant other or from your mom, it just gives you that energy to go and fight another day.
And the other thing I want to mention is that they were African American women who did this, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the other real important part. And I'm going to send you information about her because I think you'll be fascinated by she and the women who formed this group of people who did that. Wow. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
This
okay.
is really fascinating.
Yeah, and so we basically went to learn how to run a post office overseas, and so. During that training, it's now August, and one of my soldiers comes to me and says, "Hey, ma'am, a hurricane just hit New Orleans." And people who are from that area never get excited about systems because they're so frequent. And I'm like, okay, so what's the big deal? And he said, no, it's really bad. And so I go into, we have these little rec areas called break rooms. And so I went into the break room, and that hurricane was actually Katrina. And at that point, I realized my son and I had just lost everything that we owned.
Wow.
But I'm the kind of person, okay, that stuff is material. You can replace it. I mean, there are definitely some things that had sentimental value that you lose. But, my son was safe. He wasn't harmed.
Where was he, in New Orleans?
He was in Missouri with my aunt.
Okay, good.
And so I had to stay focused on the fact that I'm taking young soldiers into a combat zone. There's nothing I can do about New Orleans right now, so let's just focus on, building this team and making sure they get to this deployment safe.
You have a lot of focus, lady.
I try.
Yeah.
Well, there's some things you have no control over, and I think sometimes we spend too much energy focusing on those things. I couldn't repair the levee. I couldn't siphon out the water. That was nothing that I could do about the situation. But the more important situation is, these soldiers and all of their mothers and fathers have, looked me in the eye and said, please bring my son and daughter back safe. And so that's what I needed to focus on. But during my training, I did not feel well at all. And every time I tried to go to the doctor, I was made to feel bad about it. They have this saying in the military or the army, suck it up and drive on, or embrace the suck. But there were, I guess, some people who didn't want to go to war. So there were some of those people who were, making excuses and things to try to get out. But I really just didn't feel well. I was losing energy. I was in pain a lot. And I just didn't feel like myself.
So where was the pain focused?
My head, neck, and throat area. So just like in this area, I would get, frequent migraines and headaches. And I would just feel weak and just, not well. Didn't really want to go to the gym, work out as much. I was always very active. But they were not. They thought that I was, what they call malingering. You're not really sick. You're just making excuses. What kind of example are you to your troops? I'm like, no, I really don't feel good. But they made me feel so bad that I just decided, well, I will just suck it up and drive on. And but when Katrina hit, they had given us, who were from that area, they had given us all 2 weeks to go home and salvage our goods. Well, I didn't have anything to salvage. It was all underwater. And so I chose to go to the doctor instead. And so I went to the doctor. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the physician.
And you're still in New Orleans at the time when you get the call?
We're still training, but I'm at Fort Sill, Oklahoma now. That was our mobilization station. And this was just a month after Katrina had hit.
Got it. Okay.
So we're now in September. And so the doctor calls me and says, hey, I need to talk to you about your results. And so, okay, I'm listening. He's like, no, I need you to come to the hospital. And I said, well, sir, I have this training that I can't miss. And he was like, we can't give you test results over the phone. And so I'm still thinking it's nothing major. And I go over to the hospital. And when you walk into the doctor office, you never want to hear, I need you to sit down.
Oh, wow.
So he told me to sit down. And I said, well, I don't have time to sit down, sir. Just tell me what's going on so I can get back to my troops. And he says, Lieutenant, I'm not asking you to sit down. I'm telling you to sit down. And he's a colonel, so I'm sitting down now.
Okay.
And he says, well, your test results didn't come back favorable. You're not going to deploy now. Probably not going to deploy anytime soon. And not really sure about your military career. And I'm like, what's wrong? And he said, well, we found a mass in your neck and throat area, and it's malignant. Obviously, I haven't been to medical school, so I'm saying, well, what does that mean? And he says, you have cancer.
Wow.
And I said, no, I don't. And I just went into like a gibberish frenzy of, telling him all the reasons why I couldn't have cancer. I have a son. He depends on me. I have these troops that I'm supposed to take him to Iraq. I'm healthy. I don't smoke. I don't abuse my body. I work out all the time. So I'm just, he's looking at me and he's like, look, I need you to calm down. I said, no, sir, you don't understand. I don't have time for cancer.
Wow.
And so he just sat there quiet because I guess, being a doctor, he's probably had to deliver some news to people on several occasions. And so once I got done spouting off, I just burst into tears. Because the only thing I could really think about is my son. He didn't have a father in his life. I'm the only parent that he really ever had. And now he may not have that parent. He may not have any parents. And so the first phone call I made was to my aunt, who was keeping him, because I had to let her know. And
now, how old was your son at the time?
Brandon was around 10 or 11.
Okay.
And so she said, well, what do you want me to tell him? I said, well, I'm going to need you to lie to him. He can't know that I'm sick. You know, he can't know that I have cancer. Just tell him that I'm still training.
Now, when the doctor delivered the news, what was his prognosis at the time, or did he not have one since they were now just looking at test results?
I was stage 2 on the border of stage 3.
Okay.
And I had a rare form of cancer, but one of the more aggressive forms of cancer called adenoid cystic carcinoma. And I had to get it removed immediately and then get treated.
Had you had any symptoms prior to the headaches or anything that kind of let you know something was amiss?
I was tired all the time, but I was also training all the time too. So I figured my body may be battle fatigue from doing all of the training. But my face would involuntarily twitch every now and then. But I figured it was probably just, overexertion or something like that. But I just didn't feel right on the inside.
Okay.
And I just knew something was wrong, but never in a million years did I think that I would be told that I had cancer.
Now, I'm curious because you're in the military and now before you deployed to Iraq, had there been, test or do you have to go through a physical or anything like that before deploying?
Yeah, we did a physical, but with cancers, they find a mass and they actually have to test it and do a biopsy on it.
Got it.
So, for all the other intents and purposes, I was, a healthy individual.
I was just curious about that. So now you are going to have to go through the process of treating this cancer that's attacking you. So
yeah, so I got sent down to Brooke Army Medical Center in Texas, San Antonio. I was housed there, but I was treated for cancer at Lackland Air Force Base. So I had 2 surgeries and 30 cycles of radiation.
Wow.
I will tell you, the first week I was there, I was just evil and mean to everyone. And, I just hated the world. And I locked myself out my room one day. And I went... the setup where I was at was kind of like lodging. And so I went to go get another key. Okay, so as I'm waiting for them to make me a new key, there was a line of soldiers being wheeled in. Some were burned unrecognizably. Some had, multiple limbs missing. Some you can tell had brain injuries. And I stared at them. And I was like, you are so selfish. And I went back to my room and I looked in the mirror and I said, this is your last day of complaining, because any one of them would trade places with you just to be able to recognize themselves in the mirror. And so I never complained again because, I could have been a lot worse. The hardest part about cancer was going through it alone. As I told you, I didn't have an ideal childhood. And so I had pushed everyone that I felt was responsible for my negative childhood away, to include my mother and my sisters. We really didn't have a relationship at all. But at that particular time, I wished I had someone. And I think that was, God teaching me about forgiveness. Because that was the one time that I couldn't call on anybody, because I had let them know that I don't need you. I don't want to talk to you. There's nothing you can actually do for me. And all that, sounds pretty good until you're alone. And so I had promised God that if he had got me through the treatment and gave me that second chance, that I would work on those relationships. And obviously we say God has a sense of humor.
Very much so. And I can attest to that, yes.
Yeah, and so I guess he was like, I would really like to see that. So I was, I got my cancer remission. And
how that was in 2007?
2006. So I had spent 6 months in the hospital.
Okay. And you've been in remission since?
Yes, since then.
Okay, wonderful. Okay.
Which is, ironically, I didn't realize at the time until after I left the hospital, but I was homeless. And they, you know, because I had lost everything in Hurricane Katrina. There was nowhere to go back there, and the hospital was my address. You know, and so during that particular time, I was homeless.
Okay. Now you wound up in this area because I want to move it along just a little bit because I want people to know about the wonderful work you're doing and how that homelessness led you to do to create Final Salute.
Right. So since I was a reservist and after my cancer got a remission, you have to come off active duty. And so that's when I started to go look for resources because now I'm considered a woman veteran. And I first went to the military and they said, hey, well, once you get out, you become a veteran. So you need to go to the VA. Went to the VA. Even at that time, they still had yet to scratch the surface of women veterans. So they had nothing available. So they said, hey, well, you have an illegitimate child. So you can
They actually use those words?
Yes.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need to go to the welfare office like every other woman with illegitimate children. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it was like a huge slap in the face for me because there were tons of programs for male veterans. You know, why do I have to go to the welfare office just because I'm a woman? But that's where they sent me. And that was one of the most demeaning experiences in my life because, you know, once you go into the welfare office, you know, you're not a soldier, you're not a service member, you know, oh, she's probably on drugs or she probably has alcohol problems or, you know, she probably has a whole bunch of kids, you know. So when I walked through that door, you know, I became a person, you know, who was responsible for my circumstances.
So here you are, college educated, military career, and you're in the welfare office because the VA does not have anything for women veterans.
Yeah, the American economy as a whole had nothing for women veterans. So it wasn't just something that, you know, the VA missed, America missed it too. And I'm not necessarily sure if they missed it, but I think what the issue was is that they didn't equate the service of women to the service of men. And so since you were a woman, welfare was just good enough for you. But if you were a man, you obviously fought and you earned these other rights to have housing and all these supportive services. So we're going to take care of you. What did you do as a woman?
Wow.
Did you work supply? Did you work behind the desk? You know, did you work your cook? You know, and so they just sent you to the welfare office.
Okay.
And I never wanted another woman to have to experience that. And I didn't realize at that particular time, you know, why I had went through that situation. But it's something about going through that situation that gives you a better appreciation for it. And so after relocating to Missouri to be back with my son, I worked shortly for the Army National Guard as a civilian. They got the opportunity to come on full-time duty in Washington, D.C. And so that's how I ended up here in 2006.
Okay.
And so after being here, I'm feeling great because I'm back in uniform. I feel like I'm back in the game. I started again to hear about homeless women veterans. And I had always thought that my situation was isolated. Because
what are the numbers like when it comes to homelessness for women?
Estimated at 55,000 nationwide.
Wow.
And there are currently the fastest growing homeless population in the United States.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So...
and so I started to do some research on it. I said, and the numbers were so skewed because no one was tracking women veterans as a population. And so I said, well, there have to be more programs now. Now it's around 2009, 2010. There has to be more programs. And I couldn't find one. You know, but there were tons of homeless shelters for women and children. And again, the good old welfare office was still there too if you needed it. And I was like, this is not right. You know, by this time, you know, we've served in Vietnam, we've served in Desert Storm, we're in Iraq and Afghanistan.
And even as far back as World War II.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and we're you know, fighting, bleeding, and dying in the same words as the male veterans, but still not getting that recognition. And that was evident in the lack of supportive services for women veterans. And so, you know, I was watching the Oprah show one day.
Good old Oprah. I love her.
And she had the homeless women veterans on her show.
Wow.
And I just got angry. But I'm angry at Oprah. Because I'm like, Oprah, you're building schools in Africa. You're doing all these other countries. You know, why aren't you helping these women, Oprah? You know, you have enough money. You can do it. And I guess that's when I had my aha moment. Because that's when I realized my calling. You know, God put it in my heart and told me, you know, you don't need Oprah's prestige. You don't need Oprah's money. You just have to care.
Wow.
And that's when I decided to found Final Salute and dedicate my life to helping other women veterans and their children who may be facing homelessness or already homeless. Help them come out of that situation and get them back into a life of independence and dignity.
Now, I had an experience here recently, and we're going to talk about something phenomenal that you just did. And I am so proud of you because I remember you saying, hey, Bonnie, can you help with this? And I'm thinking, oh, God, I wish I had $1 million because I could buy the house for them. But the fact that you reached out let me know that this woman is really out here. She's not just talking, she's actually doing. And when I came back to you, you remember I asked you a question if you had gone to the Veterans Administration, and you said, no, they can be of no help. And that just made me feel like, wow, it's still the same. So talk about, if you will, the home that you just bought. Tell that story because I just think it's wonderful.
Okay, so we were leasing a property in Alexandria, Virginia from another organization. And
this is to house women veterans?
Yes, women veterans and their children.
Okay.
And since we opened our first home in 2011, we had 3 homes, and we've assisted over 150 women veterans and their children. And so we were leasing this property from this other organization for about a year. And I got a email that said, hey, did you know that your house is up for public auction? It's been foreclosed on. And I was like, no, that can't be right because we're paying the lease every month. And so the lease was to go to the mortgage payments. That was our agreement with the other organization. And
so this was an organization that you were paying and not a private owner?
Right. The property was owned by another nonprofit that has like low income housing.
Okay.
And so we tried to reach out to them. There was no answers to the email. Their phone was turned off. And so we figured out who the lender was, and the lender's like, hey, we've been trying to work with them for months to no avail, so we just have to put the house up for public auction.
And I'll tell you, this is the absolute wrong thing for you to say, for anyone to say to Jaspen that, it's done, because you did not take no for an answer.
Yeah.
So tell us, what did you do after that?
Well, I had to attend the auction, and I had to bid on the property.
Now, did you have any money?
No.
And that's what I love about her. She's like, okay, where there's a will, there's a way.
Well, I don't think God gave me this mission to fail, and he was not going to let me fail. So, I had to try. And
so you're bidding on property and you have no money to pay for it. I love it.
Yeah. And so I went out there and I said, I'm gonna start at $150,000. That's manageable in my mind. And so I started at $150.
Because you're already paying the lease, so yeah.
Right, and nobody else was bidding, and then this guy just comes out of nowhere and starts bidding up on the house. And about his third counter bid, I said, sir, I don't know who you are, but I'm here not to make a profit. I'm not representing a business. There are women, veterans, and children who live in that house, and I'm trying to keep them in it. And he says to me, don't take it personal, it's just business. And continues to bid. And so I'm going back and forth with him,
thinking, oh God, this is getting...
We're past 300,000. We're past 350. We're past 400,000. I'm like, when is this guy going to stop? So finally he stops at $455,000. And the guy goes, sold to Final Salute. And I just burst into tears.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my God, where am I going to get this money from? And, I just, from that point, the news was there. They were able to capture the story. And we had a month to do it.
I remember December was when I got this note from you.
Yeah, we had a month to do it. And so I just started reaching out to everybody. Can you put this in? Social media is powerful.
It is.
It's very powerful, So I'm like, hey, can you put this out? Can you just share it? And we reached out to other veteran organizations and they were sharing it. In about 20 days, we had raised like $55,000, which was phenomenal, but not quite where we wanted to be. I had set a goal of $250,000 because, I'm an overachiever. And probably on like day 0, we got a call from the Karen Ruth Keesland Trust out of Arizona.
I saw that, yeah.
Who made a substantial contribution, and we were able to save the house, you know,
Wow.
definitely with the help of the donors and supporters who answered the call, and of course with them as well. And we'll be doing a new rededication ceremony, ribbon cutting, in her honor.
So the bottom line is you got the house.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because, you know, some of the comments that, you know, because people hide behind these avatars when they're on social media, and, you know, telling me how irresponsible that I was to gamble like that with people's lives. And, you know, if you didn't have the money, you should have never went out there. And I'm just like, and I'm a big girl, but I'm sensitive. And that stuff really got to me.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know what? Nobody else wasn't out there fighting. No one else
And you know what?
showed up.
I think what happens a lot of times, especially with women who I categorize as being amazing, is that, and by the way, I will say, I think I'm one of them, is that most of what we do is on faith and knowing what we know. And when you step out there on faith, things really do happen. And so for those naysayers, they don't get it. You know, we'll send them a memo later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they probably have already gotten it. But, you know, like I said, I don't consider myself famous or, you know, I'm, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I'm a nobody, you know, who serves a famous God. And I knew that he would make a way through some way. And he always come through. I don't always appreciate God's timing.
I know, right? It's like, okay, God, did you hear me like 2 months ago?
Your last penny, your last prayer, your last everything, and he'll just make everything work. So, but I guess, you know, he has to test your faith too, because if you don't believe in yourself, then he's not going to believe in you.
Yeah.
So.
And on that note, we are going to have to end this wonderful interview. Now do you understand why I said early on that this woman was an amazing, you really are. And I am so honored to know you. And I want to personally thank Sheila Dixon for inviting me to her birthday party, because had I not gone, I never would have had the honor of meeting you. Of course, I know
social
you.
media.
Yeah, I know you on social media, but I did not know you on the level that I know you now. And I will say that I am honored to know you, and that there are a lot of women out there who just love you and support you. And when I get that big old check, honey, I'm going to be one of those people who's going to write one to you. And I thank you for all that you do and the service that you bring to women who have no other options. And I would like for you to look at the camera now and just tell people out there who would like to know how to get in touch with you and support your efforts. Tell us how we can get in touch with you.
You can reach us on our site, contact information via www.finalsaluteinc.org. You can also follow me on Twitter, Boothe1, and we're also on Facebook.
Jaspen, thank you so much. And we are out of time. And if you know an amazing woman who has a story that she'd like to share, we invite you to reach out to us here at Metro Magazine. You can reach out at Bonnie Metro Mag, and I'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you so much. We're all done now, and I'll see you on the flip side.